Hey everybody, I'm going to pass out some handouts here that we're going to talk through. It's kind of a nice thing that Nicki brought to the table. I think it was Nicki, right? Yeah. Cool, so I'll pass this around. Share with Yes, around the room. What's that? We don't need them back. No, which is a nice article Nicki shared regarding it's kind of pertinent to what we're going to be talking about today. All right, we're going to dive in here, guys. Thank you for hitting the door. My name is Jeff Ware. I'm owner and president of Resurgence Brewing Company in Buffalo, New York. I'm going to be moderating our little chat here today as we talk about brewers and owners, communication and collaboration. So we have a nice panel here. We got Derek Edinger from Brewery Ardennes, Jen Newman from Young Lion, Ian Conboy from Lucky Hare, and then Nicki Forster from Strangebird. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll read a little quick a bio on everybody here, and then we'll dive right into it. So Derek is the brewer and co-owner of Brewery Ardennes in Geneva, New York. Although a longtime home brewer since the late 90s, Derek is new to professional brewing when he opened the brewery with his wife Stacy in 2021. In a prior life, Derek was an aerospace engineer and executive, which makes him much smarter than me. Nicki of Strangebird. Nicki joined Strangebird in 2021, shortly before opening its doors to the public in December of the same year. As lead brewer, she's part of the creative team of Micah, how do I say that last? Krasinski? Yeah, not even close, sorry, Mika. Eric Salazars of New Belgium. Nicki's previously at Rohrbach Brewing Company for 6 years. Jen Newman of Young Lion. Jen is the CEO and co-founder of Young Lion Brewing Company. Jen started her career at Price Waterhouse before she co-founded and sold 3 startup companies. After selling her third company, Jen decided to do what she loved, start a brewery. Sounds familiar? And so with her co-owners, Young Lion Brewing was born. Although Jen admits she sucks at actually making beer, she's smart enough to know how to hire a great team that does. Sounds familiar and a really good idea. Last but not least here is Ian from Lucky Hare. Ian is the co-founder and head brewer of Lucky Hare Brewing Company located in Watkins Glen. His brewery and taproom operation experience has spanned for nearly a decade and worked all positions necessary to operate a successful business. He is a father, husband, and Philadelphia Eagles fan, gross. Ian also serves on the New York State Brewers Association board with me and is chair of the safety committee.
And we're wearing matching headphones.
Yeah, we color coordinate in solidarity, so you know who we are. So a good topic today, and I'm excited to kind of just be the moderator here and kind of let these guys lead the discussion, although I'm happy to jump in as I also run a brewery, and this is kind of a not difficult thing in brewing, but something that we all deal with. So the owner-brewer relationship. So I thought I'd kick it off with maybe Ian, Jen, and Derek here. On the owner side, and I'll kick it over to Nicki, and feel free to chime in and then answer or ask any questions you guys have as we go through this. We'll make it just a nice kind of conversation. But maybe we'll start with, for you guys, what are the challenges from an owner's perspective in this topic? And maybe Ian, want to start?
Yeah, sure. Well, as everybody knows here, owning, operating a brewery, the goal is to, one, make delicious beer, but also to sell your beer. And having a person as your brewer in line with that is extremely important. So some of the challenges are brewers don't necessarily always want to make the beer that you think might sell. And for me personally, being in both positions as an owner and a head brewer, I generally have that discussion with myself all the time as to what I would like to do versus maybe what Wegmans or Tops might say to do. So it's always difficult to actually decide on what you're going to make and to figure out what's going to be best for your business. And as an owner, when you do have brewers, like I've had a couple in our 8 years, making that decision and having an open and honest conversation sometimes is important to be able to be all in line. So from my perspective, it's always about communication ultimately, and everybody being on the same page as far as your goal to sell beer and to make more revenue.
Anybody else want to jump in on that? Jen, Derek?
My managerial, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, yeah, go ahead. No, you're going
Kind of riffing on what Ian was saying, probably, I guess, the newest tier to the industry at the table, having just opened, a little shy of 2 years ago. Longtime home brewer wants to go pro, like a lot of folks have, and I didn't remember who told it to me, but I remember meeting a lot of kind of local brewers and owners in the area, and a lot of folks in the room here. And someone told me home brewers make the beer that they like, professional brewers make the beer that other people like. And that still kind of resonates in my head today. And it's a tough choice. I think, on one hand, a lot of breweries have an identity they want to have. You want to do something different. My wife and I would also joke about the fact that, like, we talked about opening a brewery for a year. We kept on waiting. We kept on saying, well, it's too late now. It's too late now. There's too many. But we thought when we did do it, we should try to do something unique, which for us, case is Belgian style beer. But then you have this conflict in your head between you want to do something unique that gives them an identity, but also be like somewhat successful. So you kind of fight with that, I think, constantly, and try to strike that right balance. For me, I think the challenges are, so I'm both brewer and owner, and I thought this was kind of a fascinating topic that we might talk about, because I know there's a lot of smaller breweries who oftentimes the owner is the brewer in the early days, and can scale up to a certain point, and then you kind of struggle whether you can kind of keep doing both. And that's what I kind of struggle with. Can I keep doing both? How do I balance my time between the brewing side, and I got like an unlimited list of things I want to try to do there to do better. Balancing the time I should be focusing on the business side of things, trying to keep the two kind of in check, and kind of wondering, how do I get other people to help me out, or how can I keep growing the business and still keep my hands involved? I'm not fully sure what the answer is. It should be,
For me, someone who is strictly and should not be, they don't even let me start with anything because I would do the big scale and the brew house, which is a smart thing to do. But anyway, so I'm just an owner, and then I have my brewing team. One is I was nervous about doing it in the beginning. I had everyone sign NDAs, which I think is a good idea for everyone's business, but to not be afraid of transparency. Because if you have all this pressure on yourself, especially these years coming up, as an owner, and you're giving direction and telling brewer do this, and then inside their head they're like, what the hell? She doesn't know what she's doing. Like she should be doing this instead of that. But if you can have that transparency as to where you're coming from and why you're making those decisions, and not opening up your books, but saying financially, this is why we're doing this and this is what's happening in the market, then that communication happens and you become part of the same team, and then you start rowing in the same direction rather than just, I need you to make this IPA for me and I need it to be this cost per barrel moving forward. So.
Yeah, I think those are all really great points, because I think we're all obviously really passionate about what we do here. That's why we started breweries. So you got all this passion coming from all these different people, and you got to figure out how to balance that and prioritize it. So it's not an easy job. Nicki, maybe you can jump in from the other perspective, from a brewer's perspective. What challenges do you think you face, or you have in your career on the other side of things?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Just quick show of hands. I'm curious, who in here is a brewer, and who in here is a brewers first and owners? Okay, that's what I thought.
Should we separate the room?
If you thought this was going to be Fight Club brewer versus owner, sorry to disappoint you. Yeah, that's a different session. Okay, so I'm going to tread lightly on this conversation. No, I can only speak obviously from my own perspective. I've been at Strangebird now for almost 2 years, Roarbox previous to that. So I've gotten a chance to work with a lot of different people, a lot of different leadership styles and things like that. And what I've experienced is the reality that communication is constantly evolving, and ideally it's continuing to improve. for each interaction. So that's what I'm looking for as a brewer when it comes to interacting with ownership. What it comes down to a lot of times for me and some of the frustrations is planning versus reality, and knowing just from my perspective who has to execute the plan, how do we translate these bigger picture demands, the daily, weekly to-do list, in a fashion that's reasonably executable. So this is what needs to get done, and we all know that, but as the person who actually needs to do those things, how am I going to do all this stuff that we just talked about? And one of my coworkers kind of coined a phrase called peanut buttering, which we use a lot, and I think we're getting a lot better at it. But it's basically an analogy that if you take a piece of bread and you take a big old scoop of peanut butter and you slap it on the bread and leave it there, that's what Monday looks like. Just one giant gob of peanut butter. And the rest of the week looks like naked bread. There's not really much going on. And that's sometimes what the schedule can look like without any brewer input into what's actually going on. But if you take that peanut butter and you spread it out over the bread over the course of the week, how can we better make this to-do list a little bit more manageable each and every day for the people that are going to be doing the work that needs to get done? So those are two of the main challenges. And the third one, we passed around an article. If you didn't get a copy of it, I think we might have some more.
I passed them all around, but if you already read it, feel free to share with your friends.
And if not, the article is from the New Brewer, which if you're a member of the Brewers Association, you have access to. It's a September-October 2022 article called The Burden of Burnout. And when the reason why we kind of started with this article, or at least threw it out there, I think it makes a really good point in brewer-owner relationships when it comes down to no matter how much I might want to be a brewery owner or have some actual financial stake in the company, the reality is this isn't my business. So when it comes down to it, if something needs to get done and I'm not available or my brewing assistant is available to do that on a weekend or whenever it may fall, that really is a you problem. And I'm pointing at our owner. That's one of the things that I point out in the article. So we'll kind of reference back to that a little bit later, but I kind of like that little tidbit. I thought it was an interesting way to point out something that we might struggle with.
Yeah, that's great. I think piggybacking on that, you talked a lot about communication. Maybe you guys can talk to, because I think communication is key, and transparency, and I think we'll come back to transparency because it's its own topic. But maybe you guys can talk a little bit to communication and how important that is, between the brewer and owner relationship. And maybe we'll start, Jen, you want to dive into that?
It's critical, and I think it has to be constant, and I think you need, don't just be like, oh, these are the beers you need to make, and then don't check in. You need to be at least twice a week, and figuring out how's that peanut butter go? When are you taking time for yourself and go and don't, and how are we going to cover for you, because most of us, we're a smallish team of brewers. I have 3. But if, one of them goes, what happens on packaging day? And so how do we schedule all of that? So we need to make sure, and great point, Nicki, is how to get that, how to get everything covered and just by that constant communication. What are the releases that are coming up? What does that schedule look like? When do you know, when do you need to know how many barrels you need to make in order to do things that you guys work with every single day? But it can be really easy just to be like, okay, I need, this IPA this day, blah, 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 and this amount, and then not check in afterwards to finish what's going on.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to dive in on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of conversations with my assistant brewer, and with my owner hat on, there's always more that I want to do than my assistant brewer says there's time in the week to do. But I think if you're comfortable in having like a good kind of rapport and you feel comfortable that you can kind of throw things back and forth a little bit, I would admit that I'm kind of more like the book smart kind of person, and I think about like this is how we could do it, and this is what we need to get done, and this is how we want to do it. My assistant brewer is like definitely more like practical, hands-on, and handy, and they'll find a way to do something that's like 5 times easier than what I come up with. So, you know, we'll kind of have a conversation about, okay, these are kind of our goals of what we want to achieve. And then I might have an initial idea about, okay, we'll do it this way, this way, this way, this way, but then open it up for some back and forth, and almost inevitably my assistant brewer finds easier ways to do it, and we'll sequence things around, which might, you know, cause a little bit of work, but kind of a back and forth. And then there's both sort of, there's good buy-in on both sides too, that everyone believes we can do it, we get what we want to get done, and isn't feeling like someone's being micromanaged in one ways.
Yeah, I'll add to communication. For us, I mean, we don't have a very robust staff in our brewery, so we do meet on Mondays to start the week off, because everybody loves a 9 a.m. Monday meeting, kind of plan the week out, start our dialogue, get our board figured out for the week. And so we communicate that way, obviously daily. We also use Slack, which is a great way to separate your personal life to your work responsibilities. And so we try to maintain all of our communications through Slack, so that's separate, and then make sure we turn it off on Fridays by 5 o'clock. I'm in the brewery on weekends. I'm there 7 days a week, and there are plenty of times where I want to text people that know the answers, and I'll just kind of push stuff till Monday, because you can also over-communicate too, which kind of will add to potentially that burnout where you don't have the separation, or, you know, if your brewer is not in an ownership portion of the business, you know, they don't want to be on call the entire time. That's not their responsibility, and it's on as myself as an owner to handle these kind of things, but also recognize that people have other lives as well too, so it's not burden them with silly questions about which temperature this acid should be at when I'm running passivation or whatever. They can wait till Monday. Sometimes just let things wait.
Yeah, I feel, do you want to add anything, Nicki?
Oh, again?
You don't? Yeah. Well, let's move on to another thing, and I'll come right back to you there. I think that on that communication point, I think alignment is incredibly valuable and integral in aligning, and we've screwed this up at our brewery a million times where, you know, we'll be working on a small side project, and it just turns out that like what I was trying to convey is not at all what they received, and no one really knows what the fuck we're trying to do, and it just becomes a mess of a project because we really didn't align each other, and I think that's really important. So maybe Nicki, from a brewer's perspective, can you talk about, you know, alignment with management and how that part of communication you've seen it work successfully or not successfully, and then when maybe everybody else of how they do that to really align the team.
Sure. One of the things that we do, just like Lucky Hare, is we do have a Slack channel for the brew crew. We have one because we're also a restaurant. So those are kind of separate, but also we're all kind of in the same loop. That really helps with keeping everybody looped in. So that's something that's really helpful. A few other things that we do that seem to really help with communication. One-on-one meetings. I sit down with Nico once a week, and we plan out usually 1 to 3 weeks in advance what we're going to be doing. Just the two of us, and, you know, peanut butter that schedule out as best we can, rearrange things as we need to, and then we sit down as a brewing staff, and there's 4 of us. So that production meeting once a week gives us time to talk not just about the schedule, but other things, what's happening, what events are coming up, who's, you know, going to the conference, how are we getting there, things like that. So those 2 meetings don't necessarily have to take a long period of time, but making sure that's regular does really help us kind of stay on track and make sure that we're catching things so that they don't slip through the cracks. It's been working pretty well for us, and it's really interesting because, excuse me, I am very type A. I'm very organized. I was brought in specifically to help label things that didn't make sense and to put things in order. And I work for 2 of the most laid-back surfer dudes I've ever met in my entire life. So it's really taken a lot of practice for us to be able to read kind of where the other person's at and communicate effectively. And I think we're finally starting to get there. It only takes about 2 years. Patience.
I'd say also knowing how your other party communicates. So, I had one brewer that I started with, and he had to leave for family reasons, and now I have another brewer, and they communicate completely differently. So really getting that relationship, which takes a couple of years to understand, you know, when Bill used to say, you know, oh, it's some tiny little thing that anybody else would have thought was like, not a big deal. I'm like, oh man, he's right on the edge of like losing it, you know? So really understanding those cues, what motivates you and what is it, you know, that, when you're brewing needs help, ultimately it's our job to protect our brewers, so make sure that they're.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Yeah, on that note, to piggyback on Jen, we actually have all of our employees get DISC assessments now, and we really work hard to understand people's like personalities and their motivations and how they make decisions. We found that really valuable. If you guys don't do that, I would recommend it. Because we find, you know, a lot of people, especially when you have, you know, you got gung-ho sales guy over here, and you have taproom guru over here, and you have brewer over here. They have very different personalities, and they communicate in wildly different ways. And understanding those, and when you're having that conversation, knowing the other person's, you know, style of communication has been really, really impactful in how we communicate with each other. So that we're literally not killing each other because you're just not communicating in that person's language in a lot of ways. And so personally, we found that very effective. If anyone has any questions on the DISC analysis, stuff like that, feel free to come find me later and we can have a beer and talk about it. But it's been a win for us. We implemented it 2 or 3 years ago. All right, back to what we were talking about here. So I mean, maybe going back from an ownership perspective, you know, what can owners do to keep the brewing team happy professionally, creatively, while still responsibly running the business side of things? Because I think that's often something that's, you know, you're all the time.
I think like kind of go back to the theme of, you know, the beer you make versus, you know, what the public wants. I mean, hopefully you have room for some small projects. Kind of keep it fun. You know, we're super seasonal, you know, in the Finger Lakes. So, you know, honestly, sometimes we're looking for things to do, you know, in the January, February time frame. So, you know, doing, you know, pilot batches, you know, barrel programs, stuff that we always wanted to do. We know we won't sell a whole lot, but it's kind of fun and it does, you know, attract kind of a niche crowd. It's got a good shelf life, so, you know, we never have the bandwidth to do it in summer or fall, but we can kind of work on that stuff in the slower times and then meter it out over the year. No one knows that, you know, we just won a long time ago, or, you know, give people like fun little projects to do that they're kind of passionate about, kind of keeps them engaged, even if it isn't, you know, going to be contributing as much to the bottom line.
Yeah, I would add to that, you know, brewers, and knowing a lot of brewers now, I would say that they're very creative people, and being able to give them the ability to not just constantly make your flagship beers and whatever else needs to be made to satisfy the markets in your tap rooms, but making sure that you're always open to allowing that creativity to be one, it can happen, and also the empowerment of having them to be able to do it, whether it's collaborations or maybe a passion project they may have wanted to do at some point. You know, making sure that you allow that. It creates a better work environment, and it builds that relationship with trust and being able to work together on something more than just flagship beer. And you know, also rewarding your brewers too for in a financial way as well, I think is also important. If you have the ability to do that, if you've had a great year, or even a so-so year or whatever, just making sure that they're recognized is very important, because that ultimately creates that bond that hopefully, you know, you have somebody that's going to be with you on your team and your family for, you know, for years to come. So.
Also, maybe learning what they, not just as much what they like, but also what they don't like. So, for example, I have a brewer, you know, like, I haven't helped him if he had to be interviewed by the press, and it's Phil. He can be fine, that I was telling this, but he
just texted me, he's really pissed off.
Yeah, she's telling him. Yeah, anyway, so, but yeah, no, he did not like attention at all. Really just wanted to quietly, you know, make something funky somewhere, and he was happy. Whereas, you know, our new brewer actually likes the accolades, and I think it energizes him to sort of get that energy. So, so really understanding that, trying to get an honest answer of what it is that makes them happy, and then once again, protecting them from the things that drain them, and giving them the opportunity to do the things that make them happy to come into work every day. So.
How about from and I'll I think open this up to any of the brewers in the room. How about from a brewing perspective, things that, owners can do to, make it a great workplace or a place that you want to be brewing and enjoy being? We'll start here.
So, I mean, this is kind of more of a question for all of you guys, and sort of maybe to piggyback off something earlier, but so, obviously as brewers and not owners, we don't have a direct fiduciary responsibility, but it's still our livelihood, and we would still love for the business to succeed. One, because, we get to brew beer and have a job. Probably not that. But what are ways maybe we as brewers, maybe from your perspective, Nicki, if you've had to do this, or even from an owner's perspective, how would you like to be approached by the brewer if there's something where it's like, hey, we should brew this, or, I've heard someone suggested this, and your right brain, your creative brain is thinking, well, that's kind of fucking ridiculous maybe, or like, I could see how that could tank, but you want to still have like a respectful, rational conversation. Like, what are some ways that you would appreciate some feedback, I guess, maybe from your brewer? And Nicki, maybe how would you go about putting it nicer?
Nicer than I really want to fucking brew this.
But for like A through Z reasons.
Okay. I mean, I can try to answer. I've been in a situation before where I've had an idea and I brought it to the table, and it's never been a no, it's been a matter of when. So I think working those details out have been more of an issue. The situation I'm in currently is, I think, really unique because there is no. Yeah, you want to make this, okay, tell me more about it, let's come up with something together.
Yeah.
And it's really a unique and fantastic situation to be in, so that's my experience.
I don't get that something for that. I've been a brewer for many years and just recently became part owner or something, like trying to traverse that as well. And also don't really have to say a lot of shit, but just educate yourself. Look around, like when you're buying a car, you don't sit there and go, oh, I'm just gonna buy this, look around and see what cars are on the road.
Yeah.
Look around and see what beers are selling, see what people are buying, understand the industry, understand yourself, and just the area that you're brewing in, geographically. What sells in Rochester doesn't necessarily sell out here, and vice versa. Right. Yeah, just educate as much as possible so when you do approach that, take a step back from the way that you normally would and go, here, evidence. Now I have empirical things to show you that might alter that argument in your favor a little bit.
Yeah.
But we got
Sure, but at the same time, you're not a robot. Like, you're not going to brew a Scotch ale with fucking iron pipe. So, know your market.
So, I mean, that's a great point. So I always, when we talk about what it is that we're going to brew, my sales team is in there, and actually it's more powerful for my sales team to actually speak to the brewers than it is for me, because my sales team is the one out there, busting their butts every day, and they're the ones that actually have to move it. So it makes it a collaborative thing. And our tap manager, same thing. So what sells over the bar? What sells in the market? And then we have that discussion, and then I throw numbers up there, like what is the number one styles that are selling, in our area.
Do you know your brewer's name?
I'm sorry?
Do you know your brewer's name?
Do I know my brewer's name?
Yeah. You keep saying brewer.
Oh.
Like it's a
Yeah, well, so I just
like a
transitioned.
pronoun, right?
Okay, yeah.
We are literally replaceable parts.
No.
So do you know?
Whoa, no.
Do you?
Yeah, my brewer's name is Dan McComsky.
Well,
But,
You don't know Dan. He's great.
yeah, but I just transitioned from the person that I started with, and the heart and soul of the brewery, to this brand new, literally the way that I describe my brewer is the heart and soul of the brewery. I'm replaceable, right now. If we didn't have, my amazing brewery team, You know, that's it. You know, it's the heart and the soul of the brewery.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a team effort, and you know, I think it's for both brewer and owner. It's you know, owners don't know everything, and neither do the brewers, and so we're all just trying to figure it out together, right? So, I think that's, you know, to go back to your question. I think when you go to ownership, you should be able to go, and they're just trying to figure it out. Like, I mean, we talk to our staff all the time. When people come with a question, it's not like I just open a book and go, oh, okay, it's on page 62 of how to do this.
Right.
I don't know. Like, I'm going to Google it just like you are, right? You know, so, Matt, maybe you can jump in.
I was going to say, one compromise in my work is that we've started doing some more breweries. You know, no ideas off limits, but how much? So it's like it's not super sellable.
Right.
Maybe it's a small batch, experiment with it, does well, maybe scale up. It's something that's very sellable. Maybe a little random with big batch, but maybe that is a good compromise. Everybody gets experiments, you know.
Scratch that itch. Yeah. In the back there?
Yeah, I mean, just talking about what beers to make specifically, you know, what's worked for us is we do what we call fantasy draft towards the end of every summer, where we bring brewers to the table, salespeople to the table, taproom people to the table, open it up to servers and anyone else who really wants to sit in on the process, write all the beer ideas down on a whiteboard. The dumb ones, the good ones, the ones that are based on data, you know, hard sales data, the ones somebody's got a gut feeling about, or the ones maybe somebody's looked at IRI data and decided this might be something we should pursue. Everybody kind of gets their ideas out there, really make sure they're heard, and then that list is narrowed down over the next couple months. Eventually the beers are named, and then we kind of go with our catalog from there. But it was a really nice, people are getting to the point where everyone's looking forward now to knowing, oh, beer fantasy draft is coming up, oh, fantasy draft is coming up. You know, people are coming with lists and, like, you know, really well thought out, like, pitches for the rest of their team. It's become something that we, like, really look forward to as a brewery. And, you know, it's lessened the butthurt for not getting your idea through this year. You know, so maybe I didn't pitch it well enough to my peers and my coworkers. You know, I'm going to try and make sure everybody knows why this is a good idea next year when the time comes. It's been
That's
great.
awesome.
I'll add quickly to that. This is about
Everyone's doing it now.
in a relationship, but also your sales staff is also your bartenders as well, and we'll do our bartender series because they are the people that come through your doors. I'm sure you guys experience, you have a lot of customers that pitch ideas for beers and names for beers and all that. So your bartenders are listening, so getting your bartenders into the brewery to work with your brewer in creating a recipe is also just another way that you can be able to forge that overall relationship between your front of house, your brewery ownership, and getting everybody involved to keep things moving.
Yeah, I think most of our sales is through our taste room, and like the beer service, they're like on the front line. So I think we're all kind of listening to what they have to say. Because there's the numbers, of what sells, but then there's just kind of the intangible, like kind of feedback that people say, which I think is valuable or more important than the sales numbers, and just how to sell things differently. We had a bunch of beers that we were really excited about. They were these really traditional Belgian styles with weird French names, and people didn't know what they were and they didn't know how to pronounce them, and so no one ordered them. And then the taste room staff says, why don't we just call this something different? Boom, sales through the roof. But we would have never got that feedback if we weren't talking to them, because they would kind of look at the weird and try to say what it was.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, I work in a small brewery where it's just myself and the owner pretty much. So it's just one-on-one. And my approach from day one has always been the same with communication, whether it's what should we brew, what do I want to brew, what equipment do we need, what equipment do I want, what supplies do I need or do I want. Same approach. Sell it, justify it, and talk them into it. Because I don't know if it's better or worse if you have a owner that has some brewing experience or no brewing experience. But I find that approach of, tell them what you want, give them the logic. This is why I need this equipment. This is why I need, I don't know, just yesterday, I for an extra spray bottle, right? Not that we're poor, but all my spray bottles were dead or used. And then yesterday, fumbled it and it broke, and I'm like, oh, thank goodness I have an extra spray bottle or an extra set of gloves, or I want to make this beer. You justify it, whether it's a seasonal justification, or it's like, this is what's selling right now, I think this is really gonna work out, and you get them to be on your page. That's-
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's again, figuring it out together, right? And justifying, because everybody wants to see the business succeed. On that note, I'm going to kind of change topics a little bit, but also it's really in the realm of that engagement, right? So we talked a little bit earlier about transparency, and so I think that's an important thing as we got about 15 minutes left here. How do you guys approach transparency? How far do you guys take transparency from an ownership perspective? Do you guys share financials? But I think it really that's a big part of engagement, right? Is not only keeping them and this goes beyond brewers. It's really your entire staff in any company engaged with the company, but also sharing things that are a little more sensitive, like being transparent in your financials, in your plans, in your future, everything like that. Maybe we could talk a little bit to that.
We're a family-owned and operated business ultimately, and for us, we were very open in the beginning and found that sometimes that hit some roadblocks as we went on, depending on what kind of information, whether it was financial or personal information. It can help, but I think it's situational. It really depends on what your relationship is, whether with your brewer or anybody else in your staff. Sometimes being as open as you would like to be can not necessarily work, but I do encourage it if it's the right relationship, because especially if you're a small staff and there's maybe 5 of you, you got to be all on the same page, I think. And once you get to a much larger operation, that's when it gets a little bit different. Certainly when numbers can get misconstrued, but if you can be open, if you have that trust and relationship, I personally recommend it because I think it's just helps continue to build that relationship. But there's a double-edged sword on that one too. So,
Anybody else?
From the brewer's perspective, I've had that kind of top-down approach with financials, and I really appreciate it. I don't need to see a spreadsheet with net loss, net profit necessarily, but to be told, you've been working really hard, business is tight or things are really tight, so this year our cost of living increase is going to be this based on, just some data or some sort of information to make you feel either, justified in what's happening or, really good that you worked really hard and they're able to give you some sort of a little bit of a kickback because of that, being recognized for that. I think it can help either way, either lighten the blow or make things, a little fuzzier.
In my sit downs with everybody, that's usually the first thing that comes back is, thanks for the transparency. Because otherwise you're a stressed out owner and they don't understand what's going on and you're acting a certain way. So yeah, being as transparent as you possibly can, I think it's worked well for me.
We haven't found too many barriers. We'll try to be as transparent as we can. I think up until the point that talking to the staff and the ISO place in Brewery, probably so much information that we don't care about. But I think everyone, the staff definitely gets, if everyone gets interested in what sells, what doesn't sell beer-wise, or if we do events, what events work and what ones don't, and everyone, we like that because we get a lot of good input from people on different things to do, which is really good. I say we have a smaller group of, maybe we're not a big team, kind of average at 10 or 12, but we have 4 people, our executive chef, assistant brewer, sales lead, where, the 4 of us will huddle more frequently, at least on a quarterly basis, we go through all the Brewery financials. But I think having the whole team have just a sense of how things are going and what the pain points are helpful. Being a seasonal business is difficult, but I think the staff kind of understands that cash is a little tight, in the winter time where we try to pull back a little bit. But people don't get too afraid because they know that the good times will come in the summer and fall, and then we can kind of open a little bit. We can have some bonuses, or we can buy some new equipment that we always wanted. and just a general sense that there's just a little bit of a ebb and flow, I think, has been helpful to understand.
No? Yeah, Jason.
Nicki, I was wondering, you talked about like, if it's going well, you get some type of like kind of kickback. Is that a kind of structured bonus, or was that like more of a just kind of informal kind of bonus type of thing? And maybe some of the other brewers all want to speak on that as well. Do people see structured bonuses based on performance or type of kind of production goals and stuff being met and whatnot?
I think one of the questions that we did have was to talk a little bit about creative compensation. And I would say that both, it's been, part of a metered regular, hopefully raise that you can depend on every year, or a little something extra holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think thank you for this segue, and I'll get right back to you guys' questions there, because that was the next thing we're going to talk about is creative compensation, and I think just for the sake of time, we can tie in performance reviews as well. So, what's the importance of performance reviews, and then are there any kinds of creative compensation or other things that you guys have employed or seen that we can talk with the group about on both those fronts?
So when we were tight on cash at the beginning, but I really needed a brewer that could handle. I really needed Phil that could handle a large brewery.
Nice.
So one thing that you can do something called phantom shares. So what phantom shares are is they don't own equity, but as long as they're working for you, they get a stake and you get sold or something along those lines. So it's not cheap necessarily to implement, but if you found somebody that you're like, oh dear Lord, please don't leave me because you're the greatest thing on the planet, then that's something that you might want to ask your lawyer about implementing. So.
Yeah, we've done that. I think it's good if you're going to grow and maybe someone in at the early stage or in a key position. A little bit of work up front to kind of draft up the paper, but once you do it, it's there, and I think it's sort of easy to advantage in the long run, because if they do have actual shares, then it gets complicated with ownership, and there's like tax implications and things like that that get to be a real mess. It's actually pretty simple once you get like the template.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's dependent on the year. Obviously, the economy has been, 2021 was an amazing year, and it's kind of gone all over the place since then. But at the end of the year, certainly when you look at where you stand, cash bonuses are always the best. For us, we meet on a weekly basis. We have conversations all the time, so we kind of have a general pulse as to where we're at. But if you have the ability, those are always the best ways. If you have the ability to offer healthcare, 401k, those are other ways that are necessarily bonuses, but 401ks are a great way to retain and support and invest in the people that are investing in you.
Yeah, I'll just drop on that to cap that. Just make sure if you can do any kind of profit sharing or anything like that, make sure it's very apparent that you might lose money. You want to get in the ownership game, it doesn't always work out. So if that's part of your compensation, it also, if it's not there, it's not there, and there is a consideration there when at the end of the year they go, wait, what about this extra compensation? You're like, well, it's a recession and things aren't great. So just something because we've been burned in the past with that expectation is there to get paid, but nobody gets paid when nobody makes any money.
So what I'm about is that you guys didn't start off at the beginning with saying, these are our plans. These are our yearly goals. This is how many barrels we want to make, and sell in the tap room, and sell in distribution, et cetera, et cetera. So I think if you start the conversation that way, with a very clear upfront, this is what we hope to achieve as a team, and this is your goal, and this is your goal, and this is my goal. And then you get to the end of the year, then you can easily have your performance review. You can easily do your paying, profit sharing, whatever you want to do. And because people understand it's black and white, right? It's not just like, it's like Hare, I think we did well, It's actually, no, we actually met we exceeded our profit plan by 10%, so therefore we're gonna reinvest 5% and we're gonna give you the other.
Actually, you should just pull a chair up here. Because I think that covers, transparency, that covers planning, that covers accountability. And these are all things that we have screwed up and learned from those things. And it's very much how we do things now. And we've learned the painful way. But I couldn't agree with all of those points, right, guys? I mean,
Yeah. And I'd build on that too, is that, when we were starting and still kind of learning and moving into a larger facility, we didn't have a budget. We were just like, well, this is what we're making because we have to make this. And then, it took a couple of years to be like, well, what are we doing? When we look at our monthly or quarterly goals, if you don't have a budget, you don't even know if you've succeeded or failed. And it could be too late down the road and things can get off the track. So you're absolutely.
yeah, go ahead.
You were talking earlier about how, from the Brewers' perspective, like, I don't want to see those financials, it's like making it queasy. One of the things that we do is we have an annual review, and I'm a data guy in my previous career, so I put together this insane ad nauseum presentation with spreadsheets and vivid charts and graphs that the brewery, like, this is what the brewery did this way, and then we turn it sideways, this is the way we did this way. So it's interesting, you put together the rest of the staff and they're like, I don't know really what you're talking about, but you together figure out what the future can be, because you put someone sees your data and what the brewery's done in a different way, and then they get it, they have a different take on it, and well, pull your head together, and they're like, oh, well, maybe this correlates with that, and what's the goal from the brewery perspective? To make more this way, and what's the goal from a sales perspective? To sell this much more in the tap room, or this much more canning. So I think that the brewer has a way to get back to the owner with crazy data.
Yeah, I think it's great.
I think it almost in a sense it gives the brewer a feeling of ownership. It allows you, it's like flying a plane in your thumbs, you have the tools to see where you're going. Like, if you can see, like, I need this equipment, but you don't see that you don't have these financial support, you're going to just question the owner going, why do you get this? I need this. So, yeah, hey, here's why you can, here's why you can. It's just finding that whole gap in communication.
A little more buy-in.
Yeah, 100%. You own it.
Part of it. I know this, and now I don't have to ask you, you can't get this. I know
Absolutely. Right there.
So, I'm a finance, I was Price Waterhouse too, right? Finance guy, so I was always like, percentage of sales, profit share, 401k, match, everything like that. I think I got the best benefits in the world. And I have a restaurant too. And what I'm finding is that a lot of people don't even care about that, quite honestly. And I understand, and maybe they don't understand it, but I'm wondering what other intangible benefits from a brewer's perspective. I love the idea of getting the team together and having a part in the naming and coming up with beers, I think is awesome. I think that's stuff that will work. Well, other things work that are less tangible from your perspective.
Beer. Now, we struggle with this, and I'll just speak to this real quick because it was literally something that just was happening at the breweries. We get so busy working on fixing everything and running our businesses that we forget to take time to have fun and do engaging things with everybody, which is the whole reason we started the brewery in the first place. So I think it's taking a moment out of everything and saying and actively planning these things well in advance, so that you're taking time to do something fun, like go to a baseball game with the entire staff or whatever it might be. Have a party, and I think those things go a long way because I think it's not by purpose that those things don't happen. I think everyone's just so busy trying to with the day-to-day stuff, and I don't know, maybe you guys can talk to that as well.
Hearing what it is that they want to do and what is important to them. I have one brewer that's, wants 401k and another one that, would rather have, compensated in some other way. One benefit that we give is we give them a free at-cost party, meaning so we have an event space, and so once a year, and the team loves it because they're supporting, the baby shower that's going on or something like that. So it's a totally, there's not a lot of things that I can afford to do for my team, but like that seems to be a good one. Or they can look like a hero to the rest of their family because they can, you know, have a really low-cost party, you know, for reception or something like that for their family. So.
Yeah, lots of, and just for the sake of Jim, go ahead real quick.
We're all admitting that we work for PricewaterhouseCoopers at one point in time.
Yeah.
But I think
It's our newest sponsor. I mean, it's, yeah.
I'm old enough to remember when it was Coopers and Library. I think, you know, whether it's the restaurant or even the brewery, it's like getting everyone on the same page and getting everyone incented to the same goal is really important. I don't think that involved in the brewery anymore, but the restaurant folks that work for me or for us, you know, we try to have them aligned. If they can control a cost measure or can control a sale measure, then have them incented on that. And my philosophy has always been try to have an incentive program that if you hit the targets, you're going to make the compensation that we agree upon. And if you exceed that, then you should share in that. It creates the employee having some sense of ownership. And I am of the same belief you should be as transparent as you can be and as much as they can truly absorb, right? It might be very hard for someone to understand how to amortize the multi-million-dollar brewhouse that you bought and how that plays in over time, but it's easy for them to see that labor is a big component, whether it's making beer or running a restaurant. Cost of goods, those are things they can control and help control, and how do you incent them to help save you money? As an owner, you want to save money and make more profit, and if you're doing that and they're aligned to do that, then they're going to do everything in their power to not only have that result, but you're probably going to keep them for a lot longer too, having that incentive program. Don't call it a bonus. I don't think it should be a bonus. It shouldn't be something on top that you expect every year. Someone made that comment. Where is it this year when it's a tough time? It's an incentive, and you're incented to help make us achieve profitability. So that the business is there for the long run too.
Love that. Was there a hand there? Yeah, there you go.
I just want to make sure, like, you know what your model is and what you're trying to accomplish. Like, it's going to be, like, all these things are going to be different for each of us because, you know, me and my predominantly tap room model doing 800 barrels a year is going to be very different than, you know, what you're doing up in Buffalo. Is going to be, you know, it's just a completely different model and ability to accomplish. So I think you have to be very cognizant of what you are doing. Like I have a lot of kind of, you know, 10 fermenters and 16 taps and a lot of play. And we're the taproom model, so our margins are much higher than this. So like, I can let my brewers kind of be like, oh, you want to do that? Sure, go ahead, do that. But if I'm like much bigger and I have or smaller amount of like fermentation capacity, then I have to be very kind of strict. Like, okay, no, you can do that. And then you have to think of the different ways to do that. So you just got to make sure that you understand what your model is and what you can accomplish with that.
Absolutely. I think one last thing, and I'm going to jump complete topics here, that we wanted to address, and I think we'll talk about this because we're running out of time instead of doing questions, but I can guarantee everybody up here is very friendly. Feel free to ask them questions later or find them throughout the conference. But I want to talk about burnout real quick because it's a real thing on ownership side and on brewing side. And maybe how you guys address that within your breweries or with your coworkers or really from any perspective to make sure you're addressing that and making sure that's something that is talked about within your walls.
Well, if anyone knows how to do it on the other side, I'd love that insight.
I burned out 10 years ago.
I know, right? And in all seriousness, if anyone does have insight to that, because I think it's very real. I have this totally hokey thing I do with my brewers, scale 1 to 10, how are you doing? And then I follow it up with, if you need me, you're going to come, like, physically say the words, and I know it sounds hokey, and they do, but the thing is that they do come to me when they have issues or there's something wrong. So you can just find some way that you can communicate in a cooler way and find out, actually how are they doing, what is it they need, and keep reiterating, when you need something, you're going to pick up the phone and call me.
Yeah, Nicki, maybe you could jump in on this since you were nice enough to share that article, which was a great article.
Sure. We have kind of an unofficial open door policy. So really, it's a matter of I need to do a better job of recognizing when I need help and asking for help when I do, so that I don't get frustrated. Because really it all comes back to our theme of communication. Poor communication can impact your performance and your ability to get the job done. And my sense of frustration can easily fester into unhappiness and dissatisfaction if I'm not advocating for myself and asking for help. And whenever I've asked for help, I've gotten it. And a lot of times I haven't even had to get to that point, but you do. And I think that article is really valuable for anybody who's in the industry, especially on the boots on the ground side. Take a look at it, and there's some really practical suggestions. Hopefully you feel comfortable talking to your ownership, or at least if you have a supervisor in between, because there are really good changes that can be made, and there's some really helpful suggestions there.
Yeah, I think from the owner-manager side as well, knowing that you might have to tell your staff that they need to break off something as well, and from an employee standpoint, being open to that, because I think a lot of people see it as a weakness of like, I can't handle, you're demoting me in a lot of ways, or no, you got a lot on your plate, man, we're growing, we gotta get more bodies in here to help you out so that you can really achieve 100% of what we want you to achieve, instead of doing 50% of 2 different, 3 different, 4 different jobs because you're taking too much on your plate. For sure.
I think that as owners, we always need to be that professionalism, calm. And unknown, you may be like a duck that's like above the water, you're not like a dog like this, but above the water, you're calm, you're collected. I think that's really important. If you're one of these owners who always seems like their head is hair on fire, I think it's a bad recipe for having a terrible work atmosphere. Be professional, be calm, don't yell, don't scream, don't curse for the most part. You know?
I think that's a great point to end on. Oh, we were right there.
I like it when my owner yells a little bit and curses a little bit when we're both pissed off about something, for me to kick the door into his office and say, "Did you see this shit?" And he goes, "I know, this is," we just both pop off. That's cathartic for everybody.
I think to wrap it up, don't be an ass and occasionally swear. I think that's what we're going to take away from now. Yeah. All right, well, I want to thank everybody here for the panel today. We're over a little bit. Yeah, and I appreciate the participation. Have a great day, guys.